Hello, Stampin' Buddies. It's Late Night Lori from Lori's Little Bit of Crafting. I am a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in the United States, and I am coming to you on Sunday evening, not quite 11:30 p.m. I know sometimes it takes a little bit of time for my videos to post because I record them and then upload them. There's some changes going on with Facebook that they're going to be getting rid of the lives after 30 days, so I had been recording mine and uploading them, so for the time being, that's what I'm going to continue doing. So, welcome. Thanks for stopping in and watching. I am going to play with some new products. One is this Blooming Phrases. Just for the sentiments, I'm not going to use any of the little images, although they are cute. It's not going to work with what I'm going to make. And I am going to show you a couple of different ways that you can use this Peaceful View cling stamp. All right. So let me just move these things out of the way. So with this stamp, I went ahead and I mounted on the cling label, but it's really big. All right. And yes, I do have big blocks to put it on, and I could certainly do that. And that might actually not be a bad idea, maybe, because it would give me a more firm surface. But this is pretty firm because I've got it on my glass mat and I've left it in the case. All right. So what I'm going to do is ink it up, and then I'm going to put my paper on here and then use my brayer to get the paper pressed down onto the ink to pick it all up. So here's what I'm going to end up with. I did two versions actually. So I did one where I used my sponge daubers, and I'm going to demonstrate that one first for you. And then I did a second one just in a black and white with the Memento ink and the basic thick cardstock. And I did that right after the one I did with color. All right. So let's get to it. All right. So when you've got an area this big, and if you don't want it all one color, there are a couple of ways that you can add some color to your image. One of them is just taking your marker and coloring where you want those bits of color. Okay. And I'm going to go like this. I'm going to put some on the fence. And you can also use your sponge daubers to add some color. All right. So this was crumb cake. And then I also have my pecan pie. So I'm using the brush tip. You might have noticed with that one. And what I do is I don't color straight up and down because I don't want to break my tip. But what I do is I use the side, and I always do my lighter color first. And I'm using just the side of the brush. And you can see in this one, there are some like just dabs of the color. And all I did was go like this. All right. So I'm going to do some of that as well, so we can get some texture to our tree, because the stamp itself is smooth. All right. And we're just gonna put a little bit of texture in here. And I'm not gonna worry too much about having the whole image colored, because if it's faded in and out, it kind of goes with the rustic look of the stamp, I think. All right. So we'll just put some color in here. And then I can kind of blend some of that so it looks like a twisted tree trunk. All right. So then I'm going to take, I actually had crumb cake because the first time I did it, I tried to use the sponge dauber, but I picked up a lot of the green because I had already done the green for the leaves. So for these narrow areas, the sponge dauber did not work for me. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and put that away. And then I'm using Granny Apple Green, and I should probably put that over here since I'm left-handed. And I just put some of that around the edges. And I'm going to use two colors, two different shades of greens, so that I get some variance in my tree, okay? And then I'm going to put some for the grass. And the tall grass here. And yes, I am kind of going over some of the brown, the pecan pie and the crumb cake. But we're just going to go with it and we're going to see how it looks. All right. So here I'm just going to kind of blend some of that in so that I don't have real obvious circles. I had some pretty obvious circles on here from my dauber, so I came in with my blending brush and just added some color for the grass. I'm trying to avoid that this time and seeing if I can improve my technique a little bit. I mean, I don't mind if it looks like there's some texture on here because it is grass after all. All right. And then I'm going to come in with my garden green and I'm going to do the rest of the tree. Now, putting a darker color on top of a lighter color is fine. It's not going to really affect the color on my ink pad because the darker color is just going to overpower the lighter color anyway. So if there is a little bit that picks up on my sponge dauber, since it's the same shade or the same hue or color family, you know, it's all a green, so it should be fine. It didn't work well with the crumb cake, obviously, because I had a green down and then it was going to a brown shade. So that was, I didn't want to add that to my crumb cake ink pad because that would affect the color. So this is kind of coming along here. And I don't have to worry too much if I get some in, you know, the recessed part, because that's not going to transfer when I put the paper down and use the brayer, okay? Now on the top of the tree, I liked the shape of the sponge dauber because it kind of gave it that bushy, leafy look, all right? So I think that's pretty good. We'll set this aside. And then I have a piece of paper that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, all right? And I'm just gonna lay this right on top. Now, obviously that's a little larger than a card layer, but that's because I'm gonna trim the edges depending on how the ink picks up, all right? So with this brayer, this is a silicone brayer. You can use it to apply ink. So I could have rolled this in my ink pad and then rolled it all over my image if I wanted to do one color, all right? For now, what I'm doing is I'm just using that to put pressure, even pressure, on my paper. Now there's feet on this brayer. When you're setting it down, the feet should be down so that it's holding it up off of the table, all right? So there's a gap there. When you're working on it, you want to have those feet up so they do not get caught on your paper or your stamp or your case. So what I'm going to do here is just roll this and try to keep my paper from shifting, because that would not be a good thing, because we want the design just to be on there once. I don't want it ghosted or shadowed, okay? And what I'm trying to do is just put some nice even pressure. Now you can see some lines are tracking here because there's ink around the edge of here where my paper didn't cover. I didn't want to have to trim too much paper, and if I have some ink that tracks, it doesn't matter because that's the back side, right? All right, so hopefully this will be a gorgeous work of art. When I lift this up, look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? I think so, all right? I think it's really pretty. Now, if it takes you a long time to put your ink on, and you can see these colors are kind of muted because the ink does kind of dry. So if it's taking you a while, or if you have to step away to get something, what you want to do is just breathe heavy onto your ink so that the moisture from your breath kind of reactivates the ink. It gives it that extra moisture that it needs. All right. So this piece then, I would trim down to fit a card base. All right. And then I would add a sentiment, and this is what we end up with. And then I put some gems on here as well. Now the ones that I used for here are some matte finish gems. These are the faux glass dots. These were in the mini catalog from September to December, but they're still available online as an online exclusive. I don't think they carried over to another catalog, but either way, they're still available. So I'm not going to finish this card because you kind of get the idea with the one that I already did as my sample. When I did my sentiment and I trimmed it down to just be kind of the bare minimum to fit the words in, I did take my marker and I went around the edge of my paper to kind of give it an outline. All right, so this is all I did. I'm not coloring an edge on it, but I'm just letting the paper absorb some of the ink from the edge of my marker. And then you can see, hopefully, how that just gives it just a itty bitty little border, you know, just enough to kind of make it pop a little bit. All right, so that's how I did that. Now let's go on to the black and white version. All right. So this one, and that one was a little bit easier because you're just doing all one color, but I'm going to close these other inks so that I don't get super inky. All right. And I am going to find a chamois, and I'm just going to wipe this off a little bit. Get the bulk of the green off. It wouldn't be too much of a problem because we're putting black over it, but I don't like to track those other colors onto my ink pads, okay? And the chamois is nice. Basically, if you just press it on there, it's going to lift the ink. If you rub, if your chamois is wet, or if you use like baby wipes, it's going to leave water or soap in those crevices. So you want to be careful for that, all right? So what I'm going to do is then take my Memento ink, and we're going to ink this up really good. All right. And you can see I'm kind of rocking it a little bit, and I don't know if you can see that like swirled effect. I kind of liked that. You know, it's kind of like a Van Gogh technique, but all in Memento black. But I thought it added a little bit to the antique-ish look of this, you know, like distressed almost. All right, so I'm just gonna keep putting some of that on there till I have everything pretty well covered, and we'll cover that ink and put it away. Now I've mentioned before, but with these ink pads, when we close the top, the ink pad is by default hanging down, and that keeps the ink settled to what will be the top of the ink pad when we need to work on it. The Memento, if you put the cap on, the ink pad sits at the bottom, so all of the ink is going to go to the base of that pad. So I always store mine upside down. I do the same thing with my Versamark, okay? Just a little quick tip there. So we're going to lay this down. And again, I'm going to take my brayer and I'm going to turn it over so those feet are up. And we're going to bray away. And I'm not pressing super hard, but I am giving it some pressure. So I'm not just letting it roll over without any pressure, because I do want it to pick up the ink. Okay. And the thing with these cling stamps is that if you're not using a positioning tool like when Stampin' Up! Had the Stamparatus, you can't go back and have it all lined up. So you want to make sure you're getting it right the first time. Okay. Fingers crossed. Look at that. I love it. All right. So what I did with this is, you can see where there's a ridge here. There's a little bit of ridge at the top. So because this is 5.5, I'm going to take an 1/8 inch off of both ends. All right. So an 1/8 inch off of the bottom, an 1/8 inch off of the top. And that takes me to my 5.25 for a layer. And then this one, because right now I have it at 4.25, I need to take a little bit off of each side, or a whole amount, you know, a 1/4 inch off of one side. And we could actually just take 1/4 inch off of here because all of this ink covered really well. So we'll just trim that down. And that way we don't have to worry about, you know, if I had done this at 4 by 5.25 for a normal layer, then I'd have to worry about if the edges didn't pick up all the ink properly. All right. So what I would do then is add this onto a card base so that we've got that. And then I used just a little flag of this large check ribbon. All right. So this was in a previous catalog. It carried over into our current catalog that ends in May. I'm not sure. I haven't looked to see if it's going to continue past that. So I just put that under my label. And again, I used this just because, and I trimmed it down to 4 inches. The stamp itself measures longer than 4 inches. So when you put the stamp on here, it extends quite a bit further. So, you know, you could put it, if you were doing a card this way, it would go across the bulk of the card. All right. So I would go ahead and put this on a thick basic white card base. I popped up my sentiment. I put that little ribbon under it. And then I put a few of these antique pearl gems on there. All right. So that's how I finished up that card. I'm not going to go do that because you guys know how to put that on a card base, but at least you can see my 2 samples. So sponge daubers mostly and marker, and this is just with the Memento ink. All right. And you could certainly do this all in one color with any of our other colors. You know, if you wanted to do like an early espresso or all in green, you certainly could. It just depends on what look you're going for. All right. So that's all I have for you tonight. These are new products that are going to be released soon. All right, so they're either going to be online exclusive or in the upcoming annual catalog that will release on May 6th. And that'll run until May 4th of next year. So until next time, happy stampin'.